The poverty rate remains high in Africa at around 50%. Most pundits believe that a rapid rate of economic growth will solve this problem, as has been experienced in China. Even so, many African economies have been lauded as providing the best examples of countries with a fast pace of economic growth. Unfortunately, this has mostly been fruitless growth, as joblessness among the youth in Africa has reached alarming proportions. Therefore, should the target for policy be economic growth or job creation? To discuss this, we have Dr. Obadiah Mailafia. Dr. Obadiah Mailafia was a special advisor to the president on economic and policy matters after serving as a deputy governor of the Central Bank of Nigeria. Before that, he had served in many key positions around the world, including being chief of staff of the 80-member African, Caribbean, and Pacific Group of States, ACP, based in Brussels, Belgium. Please join me in my discussion with Dr. Mailafia. Well, Doctor, thank you very much for being on our show on Magnus Kpakol GVA in our Magoni studios. We're very happy to have you.
Thank you so much, Magnus. Yes. It's a great pleasure to see you again.
Thank you very much.
I've watched several of your shows and I appreciate them very much. Please keep the flag flying.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. Appreciate it. Now, well, today we're going to be looking at, we've always said that Africa is rising. These things have been written about how there are many African countries that are growing at a very fast rate. But with all that, we see that jobs are not being created. So I've often looked at a situation where I say that we're having fruitless growth. That is, we have economic growth, but there is no fruit in it. We're not creating jobs because that's what the people want. So our discussion is, what should policy be targeting? Should policy be looking at how to grow the economy, get a large economy, say like in Nigeria now, say we can say that we're the largest economy in Africa, or should we be targeting jobs? And if that's the case, what sets of policies will we need to put together to be able to do that, where we're targeting either the GDP in size or in growth, or we're just straight out targeting employment?
Well, thank you for that question. I grew up in a small farming village, missionary farming village in the middle belt of Nigeria. And I like the analogy you made between a tree that is not fruitless growth. Yes. It's like in those days that when you applied fertilizer, if you put too much fertilizer, you might have the plant grow very tall, but it will produce nothing. Or produce very, very little. So it may be that maybe we're doing some things right. We're pumping in a lot of money into the economy. Yes. We're seeing growth, but it is jobless growth. Yes. That is what the World Bank called it a few years ago, jobless growth. Yes. And you see on the monetary side, central banks are there to control monetary aggregates and to ensure balance in the whole macro economy. But the institutional aspects of creating jobs are structural in nature. Structural policies have to be put in place. You have to create the institutions that will enable the SMEs to grow. It is these SMEs, by and large, and other real sector entities that will produce the growth, that will produce the jobs that we need. And that is one of the blind spots, not only in Nigeria's national development, but in many parts of Africa. And we're beginning to see the symptoms. I live in Europe, and almost every day you hear news of young people going on boats, crossing the Mediterranean, a boat meant for 10 people or 15 people. You find 200 people on it. Of course, they tend to capsize, endangering the lives of so many people. So we must do more efforts in order to create jobs and to build an economy that is robust enough to generate the kind of jobs that will give our young people
but the question
meaningful
is,
employment.
For the countries that have been doing well, Nigeria inclusive, until recently,
Yes.
when we've seen this slowdown. But over the last, say, 5-10 years, we were said to be growing somewhere between 6-7%.
Yes.
Other African countries have done the same, but no jobs. So my question is it because that rate of growth is not strong enough, or what? Why is it we're getting this fruitlessness? Now, if I may contribute just a little bit, if I look at China, over the period of time that the Chinese economy was roaring, they grew double digits.
Yes.
And they were able to soak up, that is, eliminate nearly 800 million people from poverty.
Yes. Yes.
Is it because they grew over 10% that they were able to do that? Is that what Africa needs to do? We have to grow double digits.
Well, you see, there cannot be a single answer for all countries.
Okay.
For Nigeria and for most of us in Africa, of course, it would be great if we can achieve double-digit growth.
Yeah.
Nothing wrong with that. Mm-hmm. But that will not necessarily take us to the promised land. There is a missing gap. Mm-hmm. SMEs, technology, industrialization. Mm-hmm. Take, for example, a country the size of Nigeria. You can get all the macroeconomic fundamentals right. This would spur growth. Yeah. It doesn't take much to encourage growth in Nigeria. The issue is, what do you do with the millions of unemployed young people? We need to build industries. Yes. Without an agricultural, agro-industrial foundation for this economy, the much-needed jobs will not be there.
So who are we? Is it the government or the private sector, or government policies to help the direct push the private sector to those kinds of ends?
Actually, all of those. Yeah. But
what should the government do?
Government, of course, should create the enabling environment. Yeah. Government should create the right institutional incentives that will allow SMEs to flourish, and the real sector. Absolutely. And we should encourage and give incentives to the commercial banks to lend to the real sector. Very little of that is happening right now, and people are just trading. Yeah. You know, we're an economy that produces what we do not consume and consumes that which we do not produce. That is the paradox. And until we resolve that paradox in favor of production, and I mean industrial production and manufacturing, that is the only way you can absorb so many millions of young people in this country. If we don't do that, then we are really digging our own graves very slowly but surely.
So the reason why the private sector is not doing that is because the infrastructure is not there, electricity is not there.
Yes.
Those are, then in that case, we have a serious problem, because that's not about to change tomorrow.
And also insecurity.
Insecurity is
a very big problem. And I don't mean just reference to insurgency and terrorism and these very wicked, diabolical beasts in the Northeast. Yeah. I'm also making reference to common criminality, armed banditry, lawlessness. Yeah. These things are happening throughout. It's frightening in this country today. A vice chancellor, elderly man, a university, his own bodyguard and driver can connive to kill this old man just to sell his Toyota car.
Shame, yeah.
You know, a lot of these things are happening with cooks, with, you know, girls looking after babies and so on. What kind of country are we becoming? A country that has no morality and has no law, not to talk of the fear of God. So insecurity is widespread, it is endemic, and it is a kind of criminogenic culture that is extremely dangerous. And nobody will want to invest in this kind of environment.
So then absolutely, the President Buhari is on the right track. As I heard him saying all over the place, and saying, of course, just recently to President Obama, that what's important to him, what's primary to him, is to face insecurity.
Yes.
Because nobody will come to the country the place is insecure. But as you said, it's not just with the big time Boko Haram kinds of insurgency, But my insecurity is just even on the streets.
Yes.
Where people suffer what I call it's another kind of violence.
Yes.
Traffic violence.
Absolutely.
You can be hit at any time.
Yes.
Cars crisscrossing each other.
Yes.
Nobody stops them. A police officer standing there, he doesn't even know that an offense has been committed. So the little simple things like this, are causing problems, cause people not to perhaps want to invest in the place.
Well, I think you are being generous to call them simple problems, but they are symptoms of a deep-seated malady. It will shock you to realize that Nigeria has the worst carnage record in history. In the world, I wouldn't say in history, in the world, but currently today, in the world, our roads are the most dangerous on earth.
I can imagine
and this is
that.
because right from the late 70s, when some cartels decided to kill the railways so that their own trucks will be moving all over the country, they really sold us down the drain. And of course, what happened was that the railways were killed. They are the safest means of transportation, the cheapest. Once the railways were killed, trucks were all over the roads were choked up, and no matter how good they are, with that number of trucks that we have on these roads, there's no way the roads can last. So you have bumps all over the place. And with the collapse of institutions, nobody actually does a driving test. Nobody goes through any training to acquire a driving license. A lot of people can't even read and write. You stay at home and they bring it to you for a bribe. It doesn't happen anywhere else in the world except Nigeria. So those kind of people, once they can put the ignition, they can kickstart the car, they believe they are drivers. They know absolutely no laws. Some of them can't even read. So these are the kind of people who are on the roads. And so the effect is terrible.
Absolutely.
There's almost nobody in Nigeria whose families, either long distance or close, have not been involved in a road accident. It is a terrible tragedy.
Let me kind of segue into this. Get from that road now. Let's drive into the central bank.
Sure.
Where you know a thing or two about. You were deputy governor of the Central Bank of Nigeria. Of course, you've worked in various other capacities around the world, the African Development Bank, ACP, all over the place. Thoroughbred professional economist.
Thank you.
Now we're talking about adjusting interest rates, at least the monetary policy rate in Nigeria. What is that going to do? Because I hear talk about that. If the economy is weak, if people are not sure that they can get returns, if there's insurgency, if there's insecurity, and we perceive weakness, absent serious, strong fiscal policies, then we lower interest rate. Now, of course, when you talk to central bankers, I'm not sure if you say the same thing. They say, no, we're not lowering interest rates. We are just being indicative. This is a monetary policy rate. But pointing it down, would that cause, is that doing anything for activity?
Well, to some extent, it would. I mean, when the economy is overheating, it makes sense to raise the monetary policy rate, and whenever there's need to dampen things a bit, you can lower it. These are the classic tools of the business. But in our context, we have to worry a lot about other things as well. There are all sorts of leakages in the economy that tend to defeat the goals and objectives and instruments of monetary policy. And the fact that actually only 30% of Nigerians have any bank accounts. So the impact, as far as we are concerned, will affect just a small percentage of the population. So
monetary policy is blunt to some degree.
Absolutely.
Not quite as
exactly. Not quite as effective as it would be. So we need to monetize the economy as much as possible. We need to close up the parallel markets and ensure that we have a fully functioning modern financial economy, such that once you apply the tools, they're likely to have the desirable effect. So it's a very complicated issue. In our own environment, monetary tools might not be enough. You have to complement that with effective fiscal policies.
Yeah.